You believe the distance between you and them is measured in dollars, that if the numbers aligned, the feeling would disappear. But something in you already knows this is not true. You have seen people with less than you move with a certainty you cannot buy. You have watched others spend what you save without the hesitation that paralyzes you. And in those observations, a quiet contradiction begins to form. The contradiction that the gap you feel is not in your account. It is in your reflection, in the way you see yourself when no one is watching, in the silent verdict you deliver before any external judge has spoken. You check your balance and feel something, not relief, not security, a brief pause in the ongoing negotiation between who you are and who you think you should be. The number is not just currency. It is evidence of your discipline, your sacrifice, your worthiness to occupy the space you are in. And when the number drops, something drops with it. Not your ability to survive, your ability to feel valid. This is the architecture of a self-image built on scarcity. Not the scarcity itself, but the relationship you have formed with it. The belief that your value fluctuates with your resources, that your identity is a stock ticker, rising and falling with each transaction, each bill, each unexpected expense that reminds you how conditional your standing really is. Think about the last time you made a purchase that felt significant, not to others, to you. Maybe it was a meal, a piece of clothing, a small upgrade to something you use every day. You hesitated, not because you could not afford it, but because some part of you was asking whether you deserved it, whether you had earned the right to experience pleasure without penalty. This hesitation is not financial caution. It is identity maintenance, the preservation of a self-image that says you are still the person who must be careful, still the person who cannot relax, still the person for whom comfort is a test rather than a condition. You have internalized a standard that was never explained to you, but that you absorbed completely. The standard that worth is demonstrated through restraint, that value is proven through deferral, that the person who waits, who sacrifices, who delays gratification is somehow more deserving than the person who simply takes what they want. This standard is not wrong, but it is partially, and its partiality has become your prison. Because you have applied it selectively, you apply it to yourself with full force while watching others ignore it completely. And instead of questioning the standard, you question your right to deviate from it. You see their ease as earned through some invisible mechanism you do not possess. You see your caution as the only legitimate response to a world that has never guaranteed you anything. But here is the mechanism you cannot see. The person with inherited wealth does not check their balance to know who they are. They check it to know what they can do. The number is functional, not existential. It does not determine their standing. It determines their options. For you, the number has become something else entirely. It has become a mirror, a daily referendum on your character, a scoreboard that decides whether today you are allowed to feel adequate. And this mirror distorts everything it reflects. A high balance becomes permission to exist. A low balance becomes evidence of failure. Not failure to manage money. Failure to manage yourself. Failure to be the person who would have made different choices, worked harder, planned better, been more deserving of the stability you are still reaching for. You are in a store. You are holding something you want. Not need, want. The distinction matters because need is legitimate and want is suspicious. You have learned to treat your wants as intrusions, as distractions from the serious business of becoming secure. You put the item back. You tell yourself it is responsible. You tell yourself you are disciplined. But some part of you knows the truth that you are not just saving money. You are saving face. Saving the image of yourself as someone who does not indulge. Someone who is serious. Someone who has not forgotten where they came from and what it took to get even this far. The item returns to the shelf. The money stays in your account, but something else happens. A small reinforcement of the belief that your desires are not valid, that your comfort is not a priority, that your self-image requires ongoing proof of hardship to remain intact. This is the behavioral pattern that operates beneath your financial decisions, the pattern that turns every transaction into a referendum on your identity. You do not simply spend or save, you testify, you demonstrate. You perform the role of someone who is still working toward worthiness. And the performance is exhausting. It requires constant monitoring, constant calculation, constant vigilance against the possibility that you might slip, might relax, might act as if you have already arrived. Because arrival, in this framework, is not a destination, it is a threat. Arrival means the struggle ends. And if the struggle ends, what is left of the identity you have built around it? You have constructed a self that requires the gap to exist. The gap between where you are and where you want to be. The gap between what you have and what you think you need. The gap between who you are and who you imagine you would be if the numbers finally aligned. This gap is not just economic, it is psychological. It is the space where your identity lives, and without it, you do not know who you are. You have not rehearsed the version of yourself that is already enough. You have only rehearsed the version that is becoming, the version that is trying, the version that is still proving, still demonstrating, still earning the right to be here. The contradiction is almost elegant in its cruelty. You believe that closing the financial gap will close the psychological gap. But the psychological gap is what keeps the financial gap open. Because as long as you are the person who must try harder, who must sacrifice more, who must demonstrate worth through restraint, you will never allow yourself to arrive. You will move the finish line. You will redefine enough as more. You will find new gaps, new struggles, new proofs of effort required. Not because the external reality demands it, but because your internal architecture demands it. The architecture of a self-image that was built in scarcity and does not know how to inhabit abundance. You see this in the way you react to unexpected money, a bonus, a gift, a windfall. The first response is not joy, it is suspicion. You do not trust ease, you do not trust arrival. You do not trust anything that was not earned through the familiar channels of struggle and deferral. And so you convert the unexpected into the expected. You pay down debt. You save for the future. You do the responsible thing. Not because the responsible thing is wrong, but because the responsible thing is safe. It preserves the self-image. It keeps you in the familiar territory of someone who is still working toward something. Someone who has not yet relaxed into the dangerous territory of being enough. This is why the gap persists even when the numbers improve, because the numbers were never the point. The point was the story of a person who overcomes, who struggles nobly, who earns their place through effort rather than occupying it through right. And this story is seductive. It is the story of heroes, of underdogs, of everyone you have ever admired for their perseverance. But there is a difference between perseverance as a response to genuine obstacle and perseverance as an identity requirement. You are not persevering toward a destination. You are persevering because the act of persevering is the only way you know how to be real. Consider the last time you felt genuinely relaxed about money. Not the absence of worry, the presence of ease. The feeling that your resources were simply there, supporting you, without requiring constant attention or negotiation. If you cannot remember this feeling, that is not because your resources have always been insufficient. It is because your self-image has never allowed them to be sufficient. The sufficiency is not a financial state. It is a psychological permission, and you have not granted yourself this permission. You have withheld it, believing that it must be earned. Believing that to grant it prematurely would be to become complacent, to become soft, to become one of the people you have quietly judged for their ease. You have judged them, not with malice, with confusion, with the bewildered observation that they do not seem to carry what you carry, that they make decisions without the weight you feel, that they move through the world as if the world were built for them, while you move through it as if you are still waiting for your invitation to arrive. And in this judgment, there is something else. Something you do not want to admit. Envy, yes, but envy of a specific kind, not envy of their money, envy of their relationship with themselves. The relationship that does not require constant proof, that does not fluctuate with external metrics, that does not need the gap to feel real. You are in a conversation about plans. Someone mentions a trip, an experience, a thing that costs more than you are comfortable spending. They speak casually. You calculate internally, not just the cost to your self-image if you say yes, the cost if you say no, the cost of explaining either choice. You are not present in this conversation. You are managing it, managing the impression you make, managing the gap between your internal reality and their external assumption, managing the story of who you are and what you can afford, not just financially, but psychologically. Because to say yes might expose your discomfort with ease. To say no might expose your ongoing struggle. Either way, you are performing, and the performance is the gap between who you are and who you are pretending to be. The gap that exists in your self-image, not in your account. This performance has become so automatic you no longer notice it. You think you are being authentic. But authenticity, filtered through the lens of scarcity, is just another performance. The performance of someone who is real about their limitations, who is honest about their struggles, who does not pretend to be something they are not. But this honesty is still organized around the gap, still defined by what you lack rather than what you are, still requiring the mirror of external comparison to know who you are. You are authentic about your scarcity. You have not practiced being authentic about your sufficiency, because sufficiency in your internal framework is not authentic. It is aspiration. It is future. It is not now. The deeper mechanism is this. Your self-image was formed in conditions where resources were uncertain, where stability was not assumed, where the future was not guaranteed. And in those conditions, you built a self that could survive, a self that was vigilant, careful, prepared for loss. This self was not wrong. It was adaptive. It kept you safe. It kept you moving. But adaptation is not destiny. The self that survived scarcity is not the self that can inhabit abundance. And if you do not recognize this, you will continue to operate from survival psychology even when the conditions have changed. You will continue to scan for threat even when the threat has passed. You will continue to prepare for loss even when the loss is not coming. You will continue to live as if the gap were external when it has long since migrated internal. You feel this in small moments. The moment you finally afford something you once dreamed of, and instead of enjoying it, you worry about losing it. The moment you reach a financial milestone, and instead of celebrating, you immediately set the next one. The moment you have enough, and instead of resting, you redefine enough as the beginning of the next climb. These moments are not about money, they are about the self-image that cannot allow completion, that cannot allow arrival, that cannot allow the dangerous, vulnerable, unfamiliar state of being enough. Because being enough requires a different kind of risk. The risk of no longer having the gap as an explanation. The risk of having to be in the world without the shield of struggle. The risk of being seen as someone who has arrived, and the terrifying possibility that arrival might reveal something you do not want to know. That arrival might be empty. That the struggle was not just the path. It was the destination. That without it, you do not know who you are or what you are for. This is the identity instability that lives beneath your financial anxiety. The instability of a self built on motion rather than presence, on becoming rather than being, on the gap rather than the ground. You have not practiced standing still. You have not rehearsed the psychology of arrival. You have only rehearsed the psychology of pursuit. And pursuit, however noble, is always a flight from something as much as a movement toward something. The flight from the terrifying question of whether you are enough without the chase. You see this in the way you relate to people who have less than you, not with superiority, with recognition, with the uncomfortable awareness that you could be there, that the gap is not as wide as you would like to believe, that your position is provisional, that your security is conditional. And this awareness keeps you humble, keeps you careful, keeps you from relaxing into the dangerous belief that you have made it. Because if you believe you have made it, you might stop trying. And if you stop trying, you might fall. And if you fall, you might discover that the self-image you built was never as solid as you thought, that it was always dependent on the next achievement, the next milestone, the next proof that you are still climbing. The climb has become your identity, and the identity requires the climb to continue. This is why you cannot rest, why you cannot arrive, why you cannot allow yourself the psychological freedom that money was supposed to provide. Because the freedom was never the goal. The goal was the proof that you are worthy, the proof that you have overcome, the proof that you are not the person you fear you might be, the person who is lazy, the person who is complacent, the person who takes what they have for granted and loses it through carelessness. You are fighting a shadow, and the shadow is your own self-image, projected onto the future, demanding constant evidence that it will not come true. You receive a message from a friend. They have made a decision that seems reckless to you. A purchase, a move, a choice that does not fit your model of careful planning. You feel something. Not judgment, recognition. Recognition of a freedom you do not allow yourself. The freedom to act without the full calculation. The freedom to choose based on desire rather than defense. The freedom to be wrong and survive. You respond with support, but some part of you is measuring the distance between their psychology and yours. The distance between someone who can act from want and someone who can only act from need. And in that measurement, you feel the gap. Not the financial gap, the gap in your self-image. The gap between who you are and who you might be if you stopped requiring proof. This is the work. Not earning more, not saving more, not earning more, not optimizing your portfolio or your budget or your 5-year plan. The work is recognizing that your self-image has become a prison, that the gap you feel is not between you and them. It is between you and yourself, between the part of you that is still trying to earn the right to exist and the part of you that already exists, between the performance of worth and the quiet fact of it, between the mirror that demands daily proof and the ground that has always been solid beneath your feet. The shift does not come from achievement, it comes from awareness, from noticing in the small moments when you are organizing your identity around scarcity rather than reality, from feeling the difference between genuine caution and habitual deferral, between real need and inherited restraint, between the voice that speaks from wisdom and the voice that speaks from wound. This noticing is slow. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with clarity or certainty. It arrives as a whisper, a moment of pause before the automatic response. A space between the impulse and the action where something new might enter. You begin to build a different self-image, not by changing your circumstances, by changing your relationship with them, by recognizing that the numbers in your account are not a verdict on your character, that your ability to restrain is not a measure of your worth, that your struggle, however real, is not the only thing that makes you valid. You begin to practice sufficiency, not by spending more, by needing less proof, by allowing yourself to be where you are without calculating where you should be. by experiencing your resources as support rather than score, by allowing the mirror to crack just slightly, just enough to let some light through. This is the closing of the gap. Not the gap in your bank account, the gap in your self-image. The gap between who you are and who you think you need to become to be allowed to rest. The gap that has been internalized so completely you mistook it for reality. It is not reality. It is architecture. Architecture you built to survive conditions that may no longer exist. Architecture that can be renovated slowly, carefully, with the same attention you have given to your financial planning. But this planning is different. It plans for presence. It plans for enough. It plans for the terrifying, liberating possibility that you are already who you need to be. That the gap was never out there. That it was always in here. And that the closing of it does not require more effort. It requires the gradual, uncomfortable, necessary recognition that the effort was never the point. The point was always the being. The quiet, unremarkable, sufficient fact of your existence in a world that never asked you to earn it. A world that simply gave it, and that your task, if there is one, is not to justify the gift, but to finally, fully, without apology, receive it. You are at a gathering. Someone asks what you do. You answer with precision, with context, with the careful framing that makes your position sound intentional rather than provisional. You have rehearsed this answer, not consciously, but enough times that it flows like a script, the script of someone who has their life together, who is moving in a direction, who is not stuck or struggling or wondering if the whole structure might collapse. They nod, they move on. The conversation continues, but some part of you is still back at the question, reviewing your performance, checking for cracks in the facade. You are not present, you are managing. And the management is the gap. The gap between who you are and who you presented. The gap that lives in your self-image, not in your account. This is the social dimension of the internal architecture. The way your self-image demands not just private proof, but public performance. The way you translate your internal scarcity into external narrative. The way you become, in social spaces, a spokesperson for a version of yourself that does not quite exist. You are not lying. You are curating, selecting the details that support the story, omitting the details that contradict it. And the curation is exhausting because it requires constant vigilance, constant awareness of what you are revealing and what you are concealing. Constant calculation of whether the person across from you is someone who can see the gap or someone who will accept the performance. You have become skilled at reading this, at detecting in microseconds whether someone is operating from the same psychology or from a different one. You can feel it in the way they speak about money, about work, about their plans. The ones who share your psychology speak in qualifiers, in careful framings, in the subtle language of people who are still proving. The ones who do not share it speak in declarations, in assumptions, in the casual certainty of people who have never had to translate their reality into someone else's vocabulary. And in the space between these two languages, you feel the gap widen. Not because the financial distance has changed, but because the psychological distance has become visible. The distance between someone who is still earning their place and someone who has never questioned it. You have relationships that are organized around this gap. Friendships where you are the one who plans carefully, who budgets meticulously, who cannot quite relax into the spontaneous decision. You are not the fun one, you are the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who can be counted on because you are always calculating, always preparing, always one step ahead of the possibility that things might fall apart. This role is not without value, it is valued, but it is also a cage, because the role requires the gap, it requires your ongoing struggle. It requires the self-image of someone who is still working, still proving, still demonstrating their worth through responsibility. And if you were to relax, to arrive, to become casual in your own life, the role would shift. The friendship would have to find a new equilibrium. And the uncertainty of that equilibrium is another reason you stay in the gap. It is familiar. It is functional. It is safe. But safety in this framework is another word for stagnation. The safety of a self-image that does not change, that does not risk, that does not allow the possibility of being someone who spends without calculating, who chooses without defending, who exists without proving. This possibility is not just financial, it is existential. It asks you to become someone you do not know how to be, someone whose value is not demonstrated but assumed, someone whose presence does not require explanation. Someone who can walk into a room and simply be there without the background process of justification running incessantly beneath the surface. You have seen this person in others, in the ones who move with an ease that seems to come from a different species. You have studied them, not with envy exactly, with anthropological curiosity, with the careful observation of someone trying to understand a language they were never taught. You notice their posture, their pace, their willingness to be seen without preparation, and you try to imitate it. You practice the casual stance, the relaxed speech, the assumption of belonging. But the imitation is always slightly off, because it is a performance, and the performance, however skilled, is still organized around the gap. It is still the act of someone who is trying to be effortless rather than someone who simply is. This is the perception shift that arrives slowly. The realization that your effort to appear at ease is the very thing that reveals your unease. That your imitation of their casualness is more visible than your actual struggle would be. Because struggle, at least, is authentic. It is real. It does not require maintenance. But the performance of ease requires constant attention, constant monitoring, constant adjustment to ensure that the seams do not show. And the seams always show, not to everyone, but to the ones who share your psychology, the ones who recognize the performance because they have given it themselves, the ones who know in the way you know your own reflection, that the casualness is constructed, that the ease is earned through effort, that the gap is still there, just hidden behind a more sophisticated facade. You are in a relationship. You are sharing your fears, not the surface fears, the deeper ones, the ones about whether you are enough, whether you have done enough, whether the gap will ever close enough to let you rest. And your partner responds with reassurance, with love, with the affirmation that you are already enough, and you hear it, you appreciate it, but you do not believe it. Not in the place where belief lives, not in the architecture of your self-image, because their belief is based on who they see, and who they see is the performance, the curated version, the one who has their life together, the one who is moving forward, the one who is not defined by the gap. And their affirmation, however genuine, does not reach the part of you that knows the truth. The part that knows the gap is still there, still internal, still the organizing principle of how you know yourself. This is the loneliness of the gap, the isolation of a self-image that cannot be shared, that operates in the space between your public presentation and your private reality, the space where you are always translating, always filtering, always deciding what can be revealed and what must be concealed. And the decision is not made with malice or deception, it is made with survival, with the protective instinct of someone who learned early that vulnerability about scarcity is not safe, that to reveal the gap is to risk being seen as less than, as inadequate, as someone who has not figured it out. And so you protect the gap, you hide it, you perform around it, and in the hiding, the gap depends. It becomes not just a feature of your psychology, but the defining feature, the thing that organizes everything else. The delayed realization arrives in quiet moments, moments when the performance drops, when you are alone, when the external mirrors are turned off and you are left with only the internal one. And in those moments you see the gap clearly, not as a financial shortfall, as a psychological condition, as the persistent low-grade belief that you are not yet enough, that you have not yet earned the right to be where you are, that your presence in the world is provisional, conditional, subject to review, and the review is ongoing. It happens in the morning when you check your balance. It happens in the afternoon when you compare your progress to someone else's. It happens in the evening when you review your choices and find them wanting. The review never ends because the self-image that conducts it was never designed to deliver a positive verdict. It was designed to keep you moving, to keep you proving, to keep you in the gap. You think the gap will close when you reach a certain number, but the number is a moving target. Because the self-image adjusts, it redefines enough as more. It redefines security as the next level. It redefines arrival as the beginning of the next departure. This is not greed. This is the architecture of scarcity. The belief that if you stop, if you arrive, if you allow yourself to be enough, you will lose the edge that kept you safe, the edge that kept you moving, the edge that justified your struggle and gave it meaning. Without the edge, the struggle becomes pointless, and without the struggle, who are you? This question is the core of the identity instability, the instability of a self built on motion rather than presence, on effort rather than being, on the gap rather than the ground. You have not practiced the answer. You have not rehearsed the psychology of someone who is already here, someone who does not need to justify their existence. Someone who can look at their account, whatever the number, and feel neither triumph nor despair. Simply information, simply context, simply the functional reality of resources rather than the existential reality of worth. The shift begins with a different kind of noticing. Not the noticing of what you lack, the noticing of what you have internalized. The noticing of the voice that says you must keep trying, keep proving, keep demonstrating your worth through restraint and sacrifice and careful planning. This voice is not yours. Not originally, it is borrowed, inherited, absorbed from a culture that celebrates struggle and suspects ease, from a family that taught you to be careful, to be prepared, to never take anything for granted. These teachings were not wrong. They were protective, but protection extended beyond its useful life becomes prison. And the prison is comfortable, familiar, safe, and safe is where you have lived. You are in a store again. You are holding something you want, and this time you notice the hesitation. You feel it as a physical sensation, a tightening, a pulling back, and instead of obeying it, you observe it. You ask it where it came from, what it is protecting, what it believes will happen if you choose differently. And the hesitation does not have good answers. It has habit. It has history. It has the accumulated weight of a self-image that was built in conditions where every choice mattered, where every mistake had consequences, where there was no margin for error. But the conditions have changed. The margin exists, and the hesitation, once adaptive, is now maladaptive. It is keeping you in a psychology that no longer matches your reality. This is the awareness gap, the gap between what you know and what you live, between the intellectual understanding that you are enough and the embodied reality that you are still trying. The awareness gap is harder to close than the financial gap, because it requires not just new information but new experience. Repeated experience of choosing differently, of allowing yourself the thing you want, of experiencing the consequence which is usually nothing, of discovering that the world does not collapse when you relax, that your value does not evaporate when you stop proving, that your self-image, however rigid, is not fixed. It is architecture, and architecture can be rebuilt. The rebuilding is slow. It happens in the small choices. The choice to buy the thing and enjoy it without apology. The choice to say no to the obligation and not explain. The choice to rest without earning it first. The choice to be where you are without calculating where you should be. Each choice is a brick. Each brick is small, but the bricks accumulate, and slowly the architecture shifts. The self-image that required the gap begins to allow space. Space for ease, space for arrival, space for the terrifying, liberating possibility that you are already who you need to be. This is the silent psychological truth that lives beneath all the others. The truth that the gap was never out there, that it was always in here, that the financial distance between you and them was always a distraction from the psychological distance between you and yourself, and that the closing of the gap does not require more money, more effort, more proof. It requires the gradual, uncomfortable, necessary recognition that the proof was never required, that your existence was never conditional, that your value was never a function of your resources, and that the self-image you have been maintaining, however familiar, however protective, was never the truth. It was just the story you told to survive. And survival, however necessary, is not the same as living. The gap is not in your bank account. It is in your self-image. And the closing of it is not a destination. It is a direction, a gradual turning away from the old story and toward a new one. A story where you are already enough, already here, already real, without apology, without performance, and without the endless, exhausting need to try.